So now we're going to throw it open for questions from the media, and they can be directed to any of us up here. And then before we close down again, I will point to some people in the room who you might also want to interview, who are from some of our coalition member organizations. So, questions?
I heard on the radio this morning that new measurements through Statistics Canada that you've figured out that there are more children living in poverty. Could you speak a little bit more to how that works?
Well, it's just Statistics Canada changed the way they capture families and children, and so the entire scale of it basically raised the percentage of children in poverty by about 2 or 3% across the country. So this is the low income measure that we use. They now call it the Census Family Low Income Measure. This trend is still very much the same. They've worked the numbers, and we have the numbers going recalculated back in time, so we're not comparing an old calculation to a new calculation. But basically, it was just they're capturing more children. It also they've gradually been including the territories as well as the provinces on reserve. In the data set we use now, we have on reserve data as well, at least for some reserves, people in institutions, etc. So it's a more robust data set and a more robust way of capturing them now, through administrative data and through the tax filer data.
Was there who are these kids who are now captured?
One small example, it's not a huge number, but 0 to 17-year-old parents were eliminated, were not captured before. So young parents who were just not called children, and so they weren't captured. As I mentioned, people in institutions, people on families on reserve, and people in prisons. So those are some of the ways. Also, they've just changed because this is a calculation, a mathematical calculation, they changed the way they calculate families, census families. Used to call them households, now they call them census families. So it's a little bit much to get into the math here, but it just meant they feel it's more accurate and consistent across government in the way they're capturing families.
How accurate is it then to compare the number we have now to 2000?
I'd say it's a little more accurate. Yeah, I'd say we're more confident in these numbers. We know that actually I have the numbers here. We have we know that the tax filer data captures 75% of people file taxes, and that we have about 95%. Sorry, I'm just looking up the number here. Yeah, I think it's 95% of the. Sorry, where did it go? Anyway, I can't find the number, but anyway, about 95% of the families in poverty, we're capturing them. Is what so we're still missing 5%.
But then possibly also still missing whoever doesn't help.
Yes, and that's always because we are using. It's not just tax filer data; it also includes administrative data, but most of that's through child benefits, and so you do have to file taxes to get the child benefit. So it's pretty much the tax filer database. It's not the difference is other ways of capturing the data is survey data, and we know that does not capture low and high end of the income scale very well. So it's not a very good poverty measure to use survey data because people underreport at both the low end and at the high end.
Using more robust measurement, is it possible that in 2000 it was higher than 27%?
Yes, if you look in the report card, you'll see that we've worked it all the way back to the year 2000. So Stats Canada did that. They historically redid it. So what you see in the trends over time is accurate. It's not using old data compared to new data. The trend is a slight decrease since about 1994 and steady decrease since 2010, and that's using recalculating the historical record. So yes, we were probably undercounting before. Yeah, and we know we weren't counting the territories at all. I mean, now we are.
One criticism I've heard in the past of poverty measures is that it captures people who are not technically poor, like students, for example, who sometimes are poor, but sometimes you're not making income, but you might be living with your parents or something like that. So is there does this new robust measurement do a better job of picking out people whose incomes might be small, but they might have other income, or?
It is only an income measure. It's not a wealth measure, so we know that's another factor, especially when we're looking at inequality. We're all the measurements we get from Stats Canada are about total family income or after-tax income or before-tax income. It does not include the assets. I think there may be people who own wealth in the form of housing, real estate, and other instruments, and their incomes might be low. We don't have a way to fix that at this point. But we don't think it's significant in terms of assessing the poverty rate.
If I understand well, your main recommendation is to raise the minimum wage and to try to face living expenses, so it's more monetary, a monetary solution?
I'd say our main recommendation is in a number of areas, but one is and we want the minimum wage, yes, to go up, absolutely, and we'd like it to get to $15 an hour much earlier than 2021. So we appreciate the government has made a plan to bring it up in response to the Fair Wage Commission, but it's a bit too slow for us because people can't live, especially we're talking about families raising children. But we want that. Other speakers have been talking about the early childhood tax credit turning into a child benefit in BC that would match other provinces and be more robust. So that's a direct income support. We want income assistance rates for those. It's a minority of children who live with families on income assistance, but they're in very deep poverty because the rates are so very low. So we want income assistance rates, disability rates definitely to go up significantly and allow those people to go to school. So those are just some of the, and then there's the universal kinds of supports we've been talking about, like childcare. So we want the income supports to go up, but we also want the costs for low-income families to go down. And that would be, the primary ones would be shelter and childcare. So we've got some movement on childcare. We're starting to see some real big changes in BC. We need those continued investments so that reaches all families who need it. And then, of course, we need to get a hold of the rental market and start either building more subsidized and rental housing that's affordable for families, because that's still in crisis mode.
So do you think that the construction we are seeing right now of new rental housing is going to have an impact on child poverty?
It won't affect their incomes because that's the data we're publishing. I'm not a housing expert, but if we build lots of housing and it's unaffordable, we haven't helped low-income families at all. So I think it really matters whether or not it's rental housing that's affordable. And that would mean below the market rents that are currently available. So that means, and so we've talked about rent controls, the need for rent controls, for more subsidized social housing, keeping our co-ops and building more cooperatives so that people can pay a portion of their income and still have decent housing. So there's a number of solutions. We know what those are, but it does take federal and provincial investments, and it takes some control over the rental market and speculation in real estate. Lots of big issues there. Yeah.
So the province has just started to roll out the $10 a day childcare, not to everyone, but for just select people. Would that affect the numbers over time in terms of child poverty?
Yes, we think it will. The actual cost of childcare isn't something that will show up in the poverty stats, but what will show up is if more people can go back to work, particularly mothers, or two-parent families who sometimes had two incomes and then fall to one income because they can't afford it. It's not worth it to go back to work because their childcare fees are so high, or they can't find it. So for both single lone parent families, certainly it would make a huge difference because you just can't work if you don't have childcare and you can't afford it. So yes, then people can work, and that's what makes their incomes go up, and hopefully they get living wage jobs. And then for two-income families or two-parent families, if both parents can work, which is actually the norm now for most families who have two parents, because of the cost of living, most families can't afford to have somebody stay home. We think there's some other things we want to do because we think it's really important that parents be able to bond with their children when they're very young. And so we need to see parental and maternity benefits enhanced, and that's some of the recommendations in the report as well, because we think it's a right that all parents should have time off when they have a new baby and be able to not fall into poverty during that time. But certainly, yeah, childcare investments have always been high on our list of poverty solutions because it's a barrier to being able to work and keep your children safe at the same time.